Hey guys, welcome to another session of RBTL, or Reading Between the Lines. This is the February 17th balance adjustment preview, just in time for the end of World Arena. I believe that this will be the last balance patch for this season of World Arena. Yeah, so if you have been watching my YouTube videos and it's like, whoa, where's the RBTLs, where's the patch notes and stuff? I mean, look, let's face it, like no one was really excited about the RBTLs. So if you're watching this, I thank you very much. But it's mainly like the patch notes has just been like, what? Like there's really nothing to talk about. So I just opted not to do it. I have more time to do my actual work and focus on other things. But this is a balanced preview patch, and I definitely think that this we should talk about this. So in this batch, we do have two ML5s. Most people have been guessing Solitaria, Designer Lilibet. They have been really benched like characters, and like Designer Lilibet maybe have saw a bit of light at the beginning. Solitaria, I feel like, I mean, it was really a counter to SSB and maybe Remnant Violet. And of course there are other heroes that benefit from focus, but that was her design, and I felt like they didn't really do it, so people found other ways around it. And you know what, that was good, right? It shows that the Epic 7 community, in terms of like finding out what characters do, is a bit better than, like, well, I would say sometimes figuring out how to actually make characters work than actual Smilegate, like Epic 7 devs who are doing these balance patches. I honestly feel that's the case. Like at the moment, like people are complaining, oh, the meta sucks and stuff like that, but then you see these RTA streamers, you see these RTA players, they figure things out, you know, they figure ways around it. And yes, people still hate the casino gaming, but it's like, it's pretty cool, right? I mean, we're like, players are dealing with the hand they're dealt, and I kind of like that aspect. And what's really interesting is that most of these buffs, honestly, they echo what the players do. So I mean, I've talked about this before. I mean, and I'm not gonna criticize how like Smilegate's got to change their business strategy or whatever, but I mean, I'm playing other games, and other games have test servers and stuff like that. So again, this is a realistic thing, and it just seems that they're using the players as their test. And so it's kind of, and then you have the issue about like buffing, nerfing, and stuff like that. So I'll get into that in the sections that pertain to those topics. But let's first talk about Solitaria and Designer Lilibet. Out of the two, I definitely say that Solitaria probably does have the spotlight for me out of the two MLs. But mainly because F10E's artifact. So F10E artifact is a limited artifact. We saw it buffed with Archdemon's Shadow. And Archdemon's Shadow was, you know, is relatively high used. I mean, I predicted her to be used as high as the like RTA like third pick. And you know, at first I remember like after I made that video, people were just like, nah, she'd probably be like a good counter pick. But honestly, people are just going Archdemon's Shadow, and they, yes, I agree, it is the artifact really doing it, but Archdemon's Shadow's buffs have really proven to be very strong. Now, do I think Solitaria is in the same like line? I'm not sure about that, but I do believe that she's going to be one of those characters you wish you had the F10E artifact on. So if you did listen to my advice to, you know, grab two F10E artifacts, so hey, heck, if you had the currency, even 3, now I wish I kept 3 copies, it would be very useful for her here. So first things first, pew 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 after. This is the S1. So originally it was a 25% chance to stun for 1 turn, but then when it's used on the caster's turn, it becomes a AoE. So AoE chance to stun, and that caused some problems, right? So Bellion being full AoE, everybody had issues with that, just like, oh, you're just gonna get countered to death, etc, etc. And then Last Rider Crow, but then Bellion for last season of World Arena showed to be pretty strong. She was first pick material. She's not so much anymore, but people wanted to open up books, still has to pre-ban her. So like Bellion will, I think Bellion's in a place where she's like, she belongs. She's not super weak, she's still a threat, but she is where she belongs. but they kind of mitigated this issue with Solitaria about like being pure AoE by changing it with the extra attack, which opens up to other flaws, but of course so far I think it's a lot better. So basically the reading is now with a staff has this chance 75% chance to dispel one buff. That's pretty good. All right, so S1 single target attack, 75% chance to dispel, but then when the caster is granted Daydream, so her special passive activates Fuxia, so as an extra attack. Okay, so keep that in mind. Fuxia attacks all enemies with mana, 25% chance to stun for 1 turn. So all enemies, sorry. And so basically, realistically, it's the same thing as before, except that it's an extra attack. So what does that mean? So if you're running her into like a Rem or into a Bellion, instead of going in AoE and you basically multiply the chance of them proccing their AoE or any counter on you, you lower the chance. So they can only proc on the single target attack, which gives her a lot of benefit there, and then this becomes the AoE, which cannot proc a counterattack. So in other words, if you bring Solitaria, let's say, into Archdemon Shadow, and you don't want Archdemon Shadow to be countering her, but you want to be able to like stun her anyways off chance, you would just like single target attack someone else, and her AoE will do the dispel from F10's artifact and then stun, right? So I don't know about this though, because okay, so originally the debuffs from Solitaria would it's basically Violin would proc, and then the debuffs from her Daydream would proc after. That was her thing. I think they kind of removed it based on the reading from this. Like I don't really see a hint of that anywhere. But if it isn't the case, then you're still pretty safe from Archdemon Shadow, because you're gonna be technically in stealth, right? So in stealth, when you're in stealth, you have a 50% damage mitigation from AoE attacks. So if Archdemon Shadow does an S1 into her S2, you might not be able to knock out Solitaria out of the stealth. So she's pretty safe, and then you can't seal her unless she gets countered or unless she's exposed. So that's pretty good. But let's not talk about just Archdemon Shadow. Like I said again, the single target attack lowers the chance of being procced by Rem, being procced by Bellion. Lowers the chance, not saying that it does, of course guarantees it doesn't, but then has that AoE. So you still have the same stun, which is really good. AoE 25% stun on the S1. Heck yeah, I'll take that. You know, it's pretty strong. So, but the pew 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 damage, original damage, would be decreased, but it's not really a nerf, because it really is just talking about the single target attack. Fuxia would do the exact same damage as Pew Pew Pew. So like, does this mean that Solitaria can go for like a kind of high-ish crit rate, maybe 200 crit damage build, kind of like what people do with Archdemon Shadow? I don't know. Well, time will tell, but I think that with F10's artifact in play, with how she can technically survive quite a long time because of her stealth and her barrier and stuff like that, which we'll talk about, I feel that maybe you can build her pseudo damage. But of course I think the more obvious play is still going kind of high effectiveness, because like if you're gonna, but I've seen Solitarias do damage, right? So it's not like it's out of the question. I mean, we'll look at Edda. Edda right now is mainly a damage dealer, so I'm not too surprised some of these debuffing mages are gonna go full damage, especially for World Arena. So World Arena right now is like honestly just more aggro. If you could build something that has sustain but then has some kind of ability to just do damage over time, especially with the F10 artifact again, you're gonna build them kind of like partial damage and then just rip, you know. So it's so Solitaria so far to me looks pretty good. Let's talk about I want to go home. So decrease the focus gain by the enemy at 100%, so they'll never gain focus as long as she's alive. The original was when the caster is buffed at the start of the turn, has 100% chance to grant Daydream. And then Daydream, I believe within that buff itself is like it has a chance to do some other debuffs. I haven't looked at Solitaria in a long time, and honestly I should look at Solitaria right now to say this, but I do remember like that's probably how you can proc the Violin. Violin proc into the debuff, so like having the debuff come after, because Daydream, but they didn't remove it here. in this description, so I believe that she still retains those functionalities. So decreases the amount of focus gain, and at the start of the turn has 100% chance to grant Daydream for 1 turn. So this is really good because originally she had to be buffed, and then at the end of the turn has 100% chance to grant Stealth for 1 turn, and that originally had to be done by this. So in terms of this, like, her passive now is just way stronger. You can keep her in the stealth with another barrier holder, because she can't really keep her barrier uptime like that quick, but the thing is that she can always go back to stealth as long as she doesn't have unbuffable. So this is very good. There's no other condition other than just the end of the turn, so it's very strong. So let's say, for example, you get stunned for 1 turn and then they want to kill you, but she gets her turn, boom, she's in stealth, she's hidden. Like, that's actually pretty strong in my opinion. Boom, Starlight Fall. Let's look at the awakened version. So again, look at this. So buff duration by 1, and then stunning the target, and then push back by 30%, stunning 1 turn, decrease decrease buff duration, buff duration by 1 turn, so technically a D spell ish. Stunning for 1 turn, combat readiness pushback 30%, grant for 2 turns stealth, and then decreases the enemy buff duration 1 turn. Same thing here, and then but grants a barrier to the caster for 2 turns. Barrier strength proportional to caster's max health. So 100%, that's got to be one of her priorities, having higher health, higher defense. And I do believe that they did this on purpose, of course, because, you know, mages have harder time getting HP. So having a on the barrier, on the health, means that you are gonna have to be compromised in your build for Solitaria, which is good. Otherwise, it's too OP. Like, let's say, for example, like the barriers, like, you know, skilled on attack or something else that you would already be chasing, then that's not, like, that's gonna be pretty strong, right? So we'll have to see how strong this barrier is, but any bit of barrier, and mages can build for high defense really easily. And with the stealth, like, you're not gonna break that barrier too quick, especially if you run an Aureus. But I think again, like I said, the versatility of the especially the World Arena players, the PvP players in general, figuring out like different builds to experiment. I think we're gonna see a lot of interesting mechanics at play, stuff that I haven't even really thought of. But that's kind of like my thoughts with Solitaria. I think that at the moment, again, with the F10E artifact, assuming you're always going to be running on the F10E artifact, I think she's going to be very strong. The very fact that you don't have to start off with an immunity gives her that benefit. Of course, you do have to understand that if you do attack and you have Daydream, Rimuru will still counter her. So that is something that you just have to know. Like, that's even with if you don't have a like a immunity or anything, because at the start of the turn you're already granting Daydream. The only thing is that Rimuru can't steal it, but at the end of the turn you grant stealth, so he won't be able to steal the stealth because that's the end of the turn. Rimuru cuts in during the turn, so that's how his mechanic works, is analyze and assess. So he won't be able to steal it, but he won't be able to kill you. So he'll be able to hit you, but he won't be able to kill you. So yeah, those are kind of the things I was thinking about. So counterplay versus like Ram, Balian, you lower the counter chance. Everything else is pretty solid still. The barrier is gonna help. The stealth, the way the stealth is procced is gonna really help her use. You can technically run her forever. You can technically run her as like a spec 10E, like even against the green violet, except when it's one-on-one. Because you still have to do the S1 on him. If you miss, you get countered and you're gonna die. But she is still stealthed at the end of the turn. So this is a very strong passive. All right. Anyways, that's enough awing at Solitaria. I will say though, I don't think that this will make it. To make sure that I'm very clear, I don't believe that this buff will make Solitaria like an A Ravi per se. But maybe like an Archdemon's Shadow, so it's like she can be strong in circumstances, but and maybe not as strong as Archdemon's Shadow, but Archdemon's Shadow is really packed in my opinion, just way too packed. But she's definitely like something you probably want to build. Designer Lilibet overall, I feel that you probably want to build her. She'll have more utility now, even more so in Guild War offense versus all the Caesarea defenses, which is like one of the most popular ones. I mean, technically C. Lilius would count in my opinion as well. Yeah, so anyways, let's talk about Designer Lilibet. So at the start of the battle has 50 fighting spirit. It's technically the same thing as before, but then when an enemy turns end, gains 10 fighting spirit for each debuff inflicted on an ally. So that is double the amount, so it's much easier to proc. When the caster's fighting spirit is full, consumes all fighting spirit to dispel all debuffs from the caster. Increases defense for 1 turn before increased combat is at 40%. Remember, I did say this. If you guys are watching my videos and care about my opinions, and you saw my thoughts for ML Sirmia. Do you remember I was talking about ML Sirmia probably being some kind of experiment for Designer Lilibet buff? I was wrong about that, but you can actually see there is a huge difference. I mean, they gave her the self-defense buff, which was Lilibet's flaw, one of the flaws. Not like F Maya, and then because ML Sirmia had it, I actually assumed Designer Lilibet will have it as one of her buffs. The thing is, it seems that they already had this design under their belt, like way before, because we just got ML Sirmia, right? So obviously they didn't use the data from ML Sirmia to test Lilibet, but this kind of shows me that they definitely chose to design ML Sirmia in a more DPS fashion and then make her more utility, more supportive fashion. Like they like, if some people were building Designer Lilibet to be like half support, half damage, now Designer Lilibet will still be decent damage because she is a defense scaling bruiser. Now with the defense buff, it's going to be helpful, but they also made her stronger in terms of that team-wide support. So that's kind of interesting, but it is they already had this design under the belt. So dispel buff. So yeah, so everything is the same except that once she does the consumes the fighting spirit, she increased the defense for 1 turn. So I think that's definitely a plus. The way that this is worded here, when enemy's turns ends, instead of at the end of somebody's turn, I'm not quite sure if they were just tidying up the language, or does that change some mechanic that I'm not thinking of. I'm not quite sure about this. I can't wrap my head around it. If you guys in the comment section knows what's the difference, or at least a potential difference in a certain mechanic in a certain scenario, let me know in the comments down below, because I think that could influence how you even use her. I just can't think of the difference in terms of like seeing it on screen and like what does it mean at somebody's turn, end of somebody's turn. Oh, I guess the only thing would be like if your characters go, maybe you don't want it to G-spell on that turn. I'm not quite sure. Maybe that's it. I can't imagine it still. But regardless, they did choose to tidy up the language there. Just curious of what that would do. Model disqualification. Let's look at the Awakened version to save on time. So yeah, so decrease the debuff duration of all allies by 2 turns. So technically a D-spell. Alright, but yeah, it's pretty good. Gets on the stage, attacks all enemies, increasing the school cooldown by 1 turn. So that's all the same, and then increasing combat readiness of all allies except for the caster by 15%. So I was saying that I think this is definitely a bit like, to me it's like, yeah, you can use it in other PvP, but I feel like if you're using Designer Lilibet in AI driven PvP, I think this is much easier because you get that CR boost for the AoE, like the team. So overall, I think if you're looking at her functionality here, I think that Designer Lilibet is still falling a bit short. Now, you know, I get the comments saying that, well, Jagan, you're complaining about heroes not getting buffed enough, but in another video you're complaining about power creep. I admit, you know, I'm not contradicting myself. I'm just plainly stating those two facts as separate categories. This is a buff patch, and I have to note when stuff is underwhelming. I do think that it would have been interesting if, like, you know, she would buff the entire team as well. I'm not quite sure if the self-defense buff here, I mean, unless the damage is just skyrockets, it's like a day and night difference. I don't think that this is a really big improvement. The proc rate or the trigger rate being doubled now, that's a huge improvement. That's something that she always needed. But the issue is that, like, how can you guarantee like someone's going to proc those debuffs still, right? Like that's still her issue, in my opinion. Like, yes, you it's technically like easier to proc, but like how can you guarantee? Have you never used the debuffer and then got like 0 debuffs, right? Like it's just that scenario. So I still have an issue with that, but like all of her like power comes from people being able to dispel you, and that is not something I really want to rely on. I feel like Champion Reserado does that better, but you know, he resists himself enough. Combat readiness of the allies part is definitely a huge benefit, but I don't know if that's enough to put her into the place of like, all right, everybody, let's build Designer Lilibet. With Solitaria, I feel like it had a lot, and you can arguably say it's power creep, but at the same time, it's just like, it feels like Solitaria is just up to par with the power, if you know what I mean. So like our perception of like, you know, what is standard power is obviously always being increased. This is something that Smilegate is having an issue with, right? Our perception of what's good is being constantly increased incrementally. So something like this on Lilibet, honestly, I mean, if you're honest with me, do you feel the same way? I think you would, right? I'm not saying that though I'm a know-it-all and I know how everybody feels, but I honestly think that like this buff would be nice, and this kind of buff is nice on everyone, but the thing is they just over buff others, so then Designer Lilibet's buff doesn't seem as good. I'm not going to talk too much about Chloe here because it seems that their design is quite straightforward. Better nuker, better single target nuker with that Mui. So not the Mui like the circus scroll Mui, but that dude, the ice thief, I believe is a thief. That new 3-star. Like a lot of people having more Wyvern options, and honestly, I mean, this is probably still aimed at Wyvern. So yeah, I probably won't talk about it. I mean, in terms of like a single target nuker, she seems pretty strong, but I don't see her using a PvP scenario. Maybe not, maybe, I don't know. The EE is also changed. I also don't want to spend time talking about this one. I think mainly I'm going to focus on the PvP heroes, or at least things that I think is interesting. So Celine's buff as well. She's had like multiple, like on paper Celine has always been pretty good, right? And I remember when like Celine was released, Celine was buffed, Celine got EEs, and then now Celine got buffed again. Like I feel like, oh no, maybe she never got a buff, right? She only got an EE. Okay, so yeah, I think it's when Celine got an EE, everybody played with her. When she was released, everybody played with her, and then she kind of just fell off. Like in terms of a Politis versus Celine, Politis just has a more broad use. Like Celine, if you don't make her damage, what are you gonna make her, right? But like Politis, you can make her damage, you can make her like a bulky, and both damage and abyssal, both damage and tank Politis are like mostly on abyssal crowns now. So like Politis is just like more toxic in general. And then she can be a book holder, but then Celine doesn't, right? So out of the two, Celine definitely needed that rework, because like, you know, who drafts Celine into the meta? It's always Politis now, so it's like unfortunate, but I mean, here's their attempt at buffing her. So the intuition now will be the thing that actually casts the D spell. I think this is a good touch, but it's just with all the debuffers now, they have 2 turns, right? It's just like, so for example, you have Sea Lilius, right? I would think that was this is the best example here. So you do non-attack skill, yeah, she dispels the attack down. Hopefully your Celine kills, but then you can do the what's it called, the S2, so you can provoke her, and then she's no longer dispelled, right? so she can't go into the S3 and stuff like that. Now that's a one-off thing, and honestly every hero has a counter, so that might not be a fair assessment. But what I mean is just like I don't know if that necessarily fixes anything. In my opinion, they should have still kept the D-spell on the S3. That's my opinion. But I'm gonna talk about this for a sec. So yeah, so attacks a random enemy with blink and can be activated once every 2 turns. Blink cuts the enemy at the blink of an eye and increase the combat readiness by 20%. So that's pretty good. So if you do have her artifact as well, I believe that's a 40% push, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's a 20% push on the artifact, her artifact itself, if it's max limit broken. So including this, that's 40% push. That's pretty good, right? So that's like more than a Politis on a jump. In terms of like, you know, Astral Guide, Politis like goes up. This is, I think this is more than Politis, right? Politis is 30% or something like that. It's still incredibly high, but like she gets 40 if the artifact is 20. I'm pretty sure it is. Thunderclap. Oh man, every time I see Thunderclap, I always think about her thunder thighs. But anyways, Awaken version. So yeah, the D-spell buff part is removed. Now, if you're not really thinking clearly, you'd be like, it's okay, she already had the D-spell, right? But in a way, this is a nerf. So let me reel this back, alright? So like a little topic on that nerf and buff thing that we have. So the constant thing on, at least on global side, I can't speak for certain on like the Korean side. So I heard like from one of my stream members that the Korean players recently had some kind of like big discussion thing. I'm not quite sure about like what characters are like too strong or whatever. If you really look at it, like we say that they know nerf. If you really look at it, technically these are all nerfs, right? Well, not this. This is the red and green only shows the difference, but like in a way this is a nerf, right? What I'm saying is, I'm not saying that, oh, this is nerf, so stop complaining. That's not what I mean. But what I am saying is, it's mainly that if our commentary to Smilegate, to Epic 7 is, you guys don't nerf heroes, they're just gonna roll their eyes and say, what are you talking about? We do nerf. So I just want to bring that up. I do kind of feel that they're sneaking in nerfs, but they're not, like, on paper, you won't even think that they're nerfs, because they're still being over buffed. But they're shifting things around so that one can say it's a nerf. Remember ML Ken's counter and he gets a CR boost? People are like, oh, that's a nerf, because then he's gonna run out of immunity. He's gonna like you use his turn quicker or whatever. So like I didn't agree with that point of view, but a lot of people did agree with that point of view. So if you think about it, for the side that is saying that those are nerfs, and you're also complaining about there's no nerfs, you're wrong. Technically they do nerf, it's just that they don't nerf it the way that they did before. So I'm only saying that not because I'm saying that you guys should stop complaining. Trust me, I'm in the same boat. I think that the game would be better if they just swallowed the pill and did hard nerfs. I think I'd be okay with that at this point. If they don't nerf, then I just want every single character to be over buffed. One of my other stream members was asking, hey Jagan, would you prefer them over buffing characters or buff them but they're not that good? I said, well, in those two, I would rather pick over buff, right? Because then at least you can use the characters that you weren't using. So this is the situation, this is the dilemma that Smilegate has kind of created for themselves. That's just the side topic. But anyways, I just don't believe that the D-spell here being removed, I think that this could be like bad. Like maybe you want to D-spell while you can control it, right? So D-spelling with you controlling versus D-spelling automatically is very different. Yes, you do get D-spell, but I don't believe they know what they're talking about here in terms of like, why would you remove the manual function of the D-spell and then let it go to the whims of what the other player does? You know what I mean? So I feel that this is a nerf, and this is a nerf for the S3, but maybe not from your perspective as the full hero, right? This is what I'm trying to get to, right? That discussion of the nerf and the buffs, it's gotta be redefined now. It's gotta be redefined. Otherwise, we're just gonna be sounding like we're contradicting ourselves. Like I said, those people in the YouTube comments, Adeen, why are you complaining about nerfs? But then you're complaining about there not being buffs. Not complaining, you're complaining about not nerfing, and then you're complaining about, you know, anyways, whatever. Just trying to make a point. So repeatedly slash the enemy before triggering an explosion, absorbing some of the damage back his health, and increase the evasion. And it grants a barrier to cast for 2 turns. The barrier strength increased proportion to caster's attack. So this is what I was saying about Solitaria, right? Like this is Solitaria's barrier is going to kind of like try to force your stats to go away from like what she needs, you know what I mean? So maybe you want high defense with high speed, maybe you want some damage, but you can't do that if you want to keep that barrier up. Celine's barrier is probably going to be pretty chunky because like if we're gonna use, I'm gonna use Ice Kisei's barrier as an example. So like Ice Kisei, I think that her barrier was like very robust because it was also scaled on attack. Assuming it's the same scaling, this is gonna be really strong, including that she also gets an evasion. So if you're in evasion and you're in stealth, then you're pretty much never gonna. Well, okay, sorry. The stealth part is mainly from the EE. Okay, so that EE hasn't changed. So it's not in the skill itself. Sorry, I jumped ahead too far. The stealth comes from that, but the barrier with evasion is already deadly enough. If you're going with the stealth EE, that's even more deadly in terms of you can't knock her out. But then is that enough? Healing here is decreased. Now this is green because they're only using green and red, not as a buff and a nerf. They're using it as a before and after. The healing is decreased, so technically it's a nerf. Again, like I said, we need redefinition. And then the barrier is added, so to be technically pseudo HP. So I mean, the strength of the barrier is self-explanatory, is that you basically pre-heal yourself or extend your life bar. So in terms of EHP wise, you just have more of it. So if they can't even break your barrier, it's technically better to have a barrier than to heal increased, right? So just put it in that sense, I guess, that if that makes sense. So Celine overall, sure. I mean, like it's cool. It's cool. I don't know if that will make her like top pick priority, but it'll probably dust her off in some kind of fight here and there. I mean, there are a lot of characters right now that do non-attack skill, and I won't lie about that. So the need of having Celine to be kind of more usable is definitely a necessity at the moment. So Lilibet, so I did some reading on this. I mean, I don't even know what Lilibet's used at the moment. Like, some people do use her for RB because she technically can't even miss a Moonlight Dreamblade RB. And I think if you soul burn, she's like guaranteed to kill most of the time. So, I mean, but outside of that, like, I have not used Lilibet since her release. Like, it's okay. So overall, I don't know if I want to rate this because it doesn't seem to be like a PvP. Although I think she can do some rapid damage. So like brutally cut enemy, 55% chance to inflict 3 bleeding before increasing the combat range of 50%. So 3 bleeding instead of 4, but the chance is higher. Alright, so I mean there could be, okay, wait. This is important. Actually, this is the Awakened version. I should just read this. So when the target is bleeding after attack, increase combat range by an additional 50%. So it's a 100%. Like, so basically you go double turn, but that's only if they're bleeding, right? So assuming if they have immunity, how are you gonna get that off? Right? So that's why I'm like I don't know if this is a PvP character, but that rotation seems to be really pretty deadly. You're just gonna be basically double damage, so she could be probably a pretty strong single target nuker. But so maybe in a, I don't know, at the most like an AI driven PvP scenario, I don't know how you can fit her in RTA unless she's super fast and you're also guaranteed to get the bleed. I think that's the most important part. Soul Cutter after, let's see, slash the enemy with Cho and Mal before granting cast a skill nullifier, and then when enemy is defeated, decrease the skill cooldown by 1 turn. And then yeah, okay, so I think it's like you're supposed to do the S3. If you do kill it, it is a pretty strong nuke. I think it's as strong as Luna's S3, especially if you're on pen set. I think if Soul Burn, it's as strong as Luna's S3. Inflicts extinction and then grants the decreases skill cooldown by 1 turn. So I think honestly it's supposed to be cycling really fast, but you still can't infinitely use this. Like even if it is 1 skill cooldown and you go into snip snip and you bleed and then you get the turn again, like you're not gonna soul cutter again, right? So yeah, so I have yet to figure out where to use Lilibet. If you guys are reading these buffs and you see something again that I don't see, definitely leave it down in the comments below. Like to see that. Oh, never mind, here we go. Exclusive buff, dispels 2 debuffs on the caster when using snip snip. So before the skill. Okay, never mind, I think this solves it. I mean, but still, I mean, the question is still, even if you get the dispel, like I guess just a rapid fire nuker, I think that's it, with some protection because you get a skill null. I guess so. So Sinful Angelica, this is a pretty long video so far. I've talked a lot and I had to get a water break, so there was like an edit in there. But Sinful Angelica, I like the buff. I think it's very, very good. She doesn't need any more. She's a 4-star ML. And this is exactly what I need. So I use Sinful Angelica in areas like Arena, Guild War, and sometimes I find myself, oh, I need to dispel the entire team, right? So like, let's say a C Lilius comp again. I need to dispel my entire team in terms of cleanse to get rid of the attack down so that her attack buff becomes better. So I've been using Doctor's Bag to do that. And this is just really removing the need for using Doctor's Bag. So dispelling 1 debuff from all allies, very, very nice touch. And so that if you want a 2 debuff dispel, or cleanse rather, you can use Doctor's Bag on top of this buff. I think her buff is solid. It's not overpowered. It's what she needs to be kind of caught up to what the other Soul Weavers have. It's simple, it's easy, done. The best buff in terms of like, this doesn't really affect, in my opinion, the overall meta pool or the overpoweredness. Inos gets a bit 3-star ML5. Sorry, ML3 rather, ML5, ML3 Soul Weaver, and similar to the usefulness of Sinful Angelica, except the extinction portion and the immortality, but the speed buff, attack buff is good. Cooldown is reduced to 4 turns instead of using 10 souls to reduce the amount or increase the amount recovered. Sorry, that's the healing. So it's quicker, and then the Soul Burn now is being changed to 100% proc rate on the defense break, and also becomes a 2-turn defense break. So like useful if you use Inos, that's a buff, that's great. I don't use her. Lucy, I don't want to talk about her. I don't even want to think about her because she reminds me of the worst side story event that we've ever had, which was that dating sim one. And that thing was so long, it was so boring, and I just felt very, very demoralized to even ever look at it. And so if someone has like a quick guide on how to just min-max all the stuff I need to farm on that, I'd really much appreciate it because I hate that side story like a lot. And so I don't want to talk about Lucy, I don't want to talk about what she gains, but too long didn't watch, too long didn't read. She basically becomes a good Katie's healer. So she got barrier, she's got like, you know, restrict and stuff like that. Okay, cool. Leave, done. Adeen, I also don't care about her at the moment because I don't I don't read the story and I don't want to read all this. I'll review Adeen again when she gets her final form, when she becomes, I think, because this is my estimate that in her final form she'll be usable in places like World Arena or something. Potentially, hopefully, because all of our other MCs have kind of been usable. So anyways, I don't want to read that. Done. Cradle of Life. So this is a warrior artifact that has some debuffs. I was looking at this, I'm like, dang it, like if the debuffs were better, maybe C Lilius has another option, but in my opinion it's not like crazy. You get that random debuff, it's 2 turns instead of 1, you get higher proc rates, you change a poison to a burn, which is more effective in PvP. Poison's more effective with higher HP. But still, it's just like, I don't know, man. Who would use this? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Who would use this? Like, Celilius, I think that Champions Trophy would be better for the stuns. And outside of that, the nostalgia, is it nostalgic? Nostalgic music box or whatever, that artifact, that event one, is pretty spicy, man. Like, that's actually pretty good. I've said that in multiple areas, multiple times. That artifact is like one of the best event artifacts that we've got. Like, usable, cheap to enhance, free, and a lot of people can use it, especially all the high speed heroes that we're having lately. A Little Queen's Huge Crown, it's basically just the same thing, except you get the initial damage without the barrier, but with the barrier you get the exact same damage, 32%. So I mean, it's a buff, it is a buff. L's Fist increases attack by 10% innate, and then everything else still remains the same, so that's pretty cool. L's Fist, I don't know if there's any PvP hero at the moment that's a warrior that would benefit from L's Fist over anything else, like Draco Plate, Sigurd's Scythe. Maybe in what's it called, PvE, maybe L's Fist would be pretty good there, getting extra 10% attack. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, so that's it. So anyways, that's been a long video. As you can tell, I was getting really impatient at the end there. The big talking points I think are just Celine, of course, like whether or not you even think that she's viable. I think probably, but I don't know if that makes her like really good. I have an issue with the Dispel being not controllable, her cleanse, that is. Solitaria, Designer Lilibet, to me, Solitaria takes the cake for this one. Designer Lilibet is better than her original, but I don't think that puts her up in the like the ML Cowerick category. Let's put it that way. Let's just put it that way. Alright, anyways, I'm gonna end this here for the video recording. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.